Hello and welcome to JSB Talks Digital, the podcast for marketers, digital change champions, and those of you bringing your skills into the digital age. I'm Joanne Sweeney-Burke and this podcast is brought to you by Digital Training Institute. In this episode, I share my tips on how to create content consistently and how to commit to delivering on time, every time. In social media news, Snapchat adds new Snap Map feature to help improve discovery and connection. Periscope adds Super Hearts, a new way to monetize live streams. And Twitter updates its user interface. I interviewed Jill Holtz, co-founder of MyKidsTime.com and creator of DigitalForSales.com, about how to commit to content. In shoutouts, 3 brilliant content creator case studies. Ask JSB, in JSB's column, content marketing trends and tips, and find out what social media tool saved my working week.
Social media news.
Snapchat's share price rose after it announced the rollout of their new Maps feature, which shows you where your friends are. SnapMap will let the app's 166 million users share their locations with each other. To try it out, update your app and pinch your fingers on the camera screen to open the map. Snap product designer Jack Brody told Refinery29 about the update. He says, "This map isn't about where I am, it's about where are my friends and what are they up to. It's not about figuring out how to get to your destination, but about discovering where you want to go." If you're not comfortable with friends seeing your location, you can stay off the Snap Map with Ghost Mode. Watch the video on the blog post associated with this podcast to see how it works. Snap Map, maybe the answer to JSB's getting lost problem. Periscope has announced Super Hearts, a new way for live streamers to monetize their work. This new option will enable viewers to purchase hearts, which can then be applied to their favourite streams. You will see the Super Hearts floating up at the right of a broadcast, and the new hearts stand out and take precedence over the common Periscope heart icons. Users will be able to purchase packages of hearts for different amounts, starting from 99 cents and going up to $100. It seems that broadcasters can also make money from Super Hearts. In an article this week, TechCrunch explains, once broadcasters have $175 worth of stars, around 185,000 stars, they can apply to join Periscope's Super Broadcaster program. If admitted, they can cash out their star balance for real money via ACH transfer at the end of each month. Twitter has made a raft of changes to its user interface. The changes are reflected across multiple platforms, including on desktop, its mobile application for iOS, Android, TweetDeck, and Twitter Lite. Writing on their blog, Twitter says, "With lots of feedback and ideas from you, we're refreshing our product, making it feel lighter, faster, and easier to use." So, what's in the new updates? Profile, additional accounts, settings, and privacy are now all in one place. Links to articles and websites now open in Safari's viewer in the Twitter app, so you can easily access accounts on websites you're already signed into. They've also refined their typography to make it more consistent, along with bolder headlines to make it easier to focus on what's happening. They've got more intuitive icons, making it easier to engage with tweets, and tweets now update instantly with reply, retweet, and like counts, so you can see conversations as they're happening live. They've listed all their changes in detail on their blog.
Interview.
In today's show, I'm joined by a super social media friend. Jill Holtz is co-founder of MyKidsTime.com, an award-winning website for parents that has grown a large and engaged community of over 600,000 fans on Facebook. She's also created DigitalForSales.com, which gives resources and online training courses for businesses who want to target and market to parents. Jill is a consultant and speaker who loves sharing her passion for content and social media to help businesses drive results. Jill, you're very welcome to JSB Talks Digital.
Thanks, Joanne. I'm so excited to be on the show today.
So both you and I love content, and it was around a conversation about content that we decided to come up with the topic for today's show. So tell me, how has content marketing actually helped your businesses?
Well, I think the first thing it's done for us is give us content for social. So by producing content on for our business, we have instantly something to share with our social media followers. What that has done, secondly, is built trust. I really love this quote by Andrew Davis. I don't know if you know him. He's an author and marketing speaker. And he says that content builds relationships. Relationships are built on trust, and trust drives revenue. So what we've found with My Kids Time is that parents love to see what our content is about, and that brings visits to our website that we can monetize in that way. And then for our business channel, it's about bringing leads. So the content has really helped us to do that.
Now, my favourite content type obviously has to be podcasting because it's where I find that I have most fun, and that's behind the mic. So what's your favourite content type?
Well, I think for me, in terms of what I create, my favourite is blog posts. I just have always enjoyed writing, and I just like to be able to express concepts either to parents or to businesses that hopefully help them in some ways. But I love watching other people doing video content, visual stuff, and what's really interesting to me as well is there's been a lot of dialogue about how video is king and everything else is going to go away. I don't believe that for a minute. If you just take the example of watching a recipe video, you have to rewind it about 10 times to get the ingredients unless they're also written down. So I think that in the future it's going to be blended content that really works for people.
Now, we talk a lot about processes in businesses. Have you any processes that you implement when it comes to creating content? And of course, you create long form content, so that in itself almost needs a process.
Yeah, I absolutely believe if you're going to commit to content for your business, you need to have a process in place. Now, this doesn't need to be complex. It's about thinking through from basically planning your content to creating it. Simple things like have proofing in there. You don't want content to go out that has mistakes in it. And then towards the end of the process is really distribution. But it's not really a singular line process. You also need to, after you've distributed your content, look at whether people engaged it, read it, watched it, etc. So then you're feeding that back into your planning. So it's kind of like a cycle that you're going through.
As self-employed social media strategists and consultants, we don't really have anybody keeping us accountable, well, apart from our clients or maybe our community. Do you have any tips on how to commit to creating content consistently? Because I know that's one of the most asked questions that I get, but I want to ask you.
Yeah, and I likewise, I work with quite a few businesses and they struggle with that commitment. So the first thing I think is to decide what you can commit to. Who you have in your organization that can produce content. Now, some people love podcasts, some people enjoy writing, some people just eat up Snapchat stories. So the who then and what they love is where the secret lies, because if you can tap into what you love, then you're far more likely to produce it consistently. And then my second tip is really about quality. There's no point in turning out rubbish quality content. Nobody's going to ever come back to you if they read a piece that's not very good or listen to something that's not good. So it's much better to say what's realistic for us to produce that's also good quality. So whether that be once a month, that's okay. And then the second thing I think is, or the third thing, I think this is my third tip, is then you put that onto a plan with deadlines. Whatever you use to manage your tasks in your business, just set those deadlines then and allow enough lead time to create the content.
I love tip number one, and it's so important that you do what you love and what feels right for you, because I think a lot of the mistakes that some people in our industry make is that they try and emulate others and they look at what other people are doing and they feel under pressure, whereas if you just kind of take a step back and think about what you can produce that's authentic and that's passionate and that will come through in your content, then that's a really good starting point.
Definitely.
So did you ever have a time when a piece of content just didn't fly? That it just kind of bombed? And believe me, I have plenty of examples. But I think it's really good to share with listeners, how you identify when something doesn't work and what you learn from it.
Oh, and like you, we've had plenty of times where we've spent time putting content together and it's gone out, we've distributed, and then we've looked and gone, what happened there? But sometimes it's a simple thing like you didn't use the right title, or you were in a rush to get it produced, so you actually didn't spend time on the visual. So over time I've realised that as well as the actual core content, the image that you use to go with it and the title that you place and indeed the post text if you're sharing it on social, they all really matter. So sometimes it's even just tweaking and using your analytics and your insights, looking at the response and then tweaking it, sharing it again. If after 2 or 3 tweaks then it's still not working, then really people don't want that.
Yeah,
and it's okay to say, actually, that didn't work, let's dump that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's okay to walk away and to leave it behind you.
Absolutely, and we've left plenty of content behind. But it's amazing how, as you go through the process of getting better at this, you actually realise that just tweaking things sometimes can make a huge difference to turning, ultimately, browsers into readers.
So let's talk about users and how important it is for us to create content with the user in mind and not necessarily our brands in mind. So you have 2 very different businesses targeting different audiences. One is B2C, one is B2B. So how do you approach that?
Well, funnily enough, Joanne, I think that there's sort of commonalities. I mean, it sort of depends on your brand and your business as to what you produce, but you ultimately need to look at what people want to read or view or listen to. But there are some common things I found over time, and it doesn't really matter whether it's B2C or B2B or indeed what type of business to business. So the first thing I've found is people really do respond to emotion. Now, that could be at a business level, just a story, an authentic story about how you founded the business and your passion. So there's a kind of response on that level. Obviously, on the parenting side, oh my God, parents love soppy stuff. They love cute pictures. They love emotional, kind of inspiring quotes as well. So that's the second thread, is kind of inspiration, and you see that a lot with the businesses who do really well with content. They're writing kind of inspiring stories. Solving a problem is always a winner, so whoever your target audience is, how can you help them? Now, your business is in business because you are solving a problem, but they have lots of problems in their life, so if you can help them solve some of those other problems at the same time, that builds good trust. And kind of things like being a better person, and that holds again for B2C just as much as B2B. So, I want to be a better parent. So articles like 20 things to tell your daughter do very well because people want to know what they need to tell their daughters. Likewise, on the business side is, here are 10 tools to help you with creating visuals because you want to be better at that. So those kinds of themes are actually kind of across well, they say now there's no B2B and B2C. It's actually just people to people, isn't it, in marketing?
Yeah, human to human, isn't that what
it is? Yeah.
So when you've got your content down, you've promoted it, what metrics do you measure to assess the success or otherwise of a piece of content?
So it depends on the objective of the content is the first thing. So sometimes you want a piece of content to be all about engagement and brand awareness. So then you're looking at things like reach if you've shared it on social media. But, page views at the first level, views if it's video. Again, if it's a written piece, you're looking at dwell times. So apparently the average dwell time now on a piece of content online is 30 seconds. People have this kind of really quick in and out stuff. So if you can get people to spend longer than a minute on written content or content that you've put on your blog, so dwell time becomes really important. And then we look at things like shares. Again, if we're shared that piece of content on social, are people sharing that to their network? And actually, for us, one of the biggest success metrics is if somebody tags another person on social media, because that means they've put themselves out publicly to say this is something you should look at. And people only do that if they really feel that the content's great.
Now, tell me about what tools you have in your content marketing toolbox. Have you got any favourites?
Well, number one has to be Google's keyword planner, because if you're going to produce content for your blog, you may as well maximize the opportunity of, can it be found on search engines. So, they've changed it recently, so it's not quite as specific as it used to be unless you're running a lot of Google ads, but there's still, it's such a useful tool to go in and try out a few different phrases around what you think people might be searching on to reach that topic. I just like looking at Twitter and kind of seeing what's going on in the land of either parenting or business, and I get a lot of ideas there. So I personally use Twitter quite a lot for that. And then my absolute favourite visual tool is Canva. I just can't beat it in terms of being able to brand visuals for our content, lead images, for example, or thumbnails for YouTube.
Okay, so before we finish, I want to know the inside track in your mind, Jill. What are your big content aspirations over the next year or so for your business? What do you want to achieve?
Well, for us, it's really about getting better at video because, as I say, we've kind of got strengths in writing and, doing blog posts. So can we really produce engaging videos? So that's what we're working really hard on. But I'm also really interested in seeing what's coming down the tracks in the way of new publishing technologies. Things have gone so mobile now online, and so what is mobile friendly? That is a way of publishing your content out there and distributing it.
Excellent. And finally, tell my listeners where they can find you online.
So My Kids Time is exactly that. My Kids Time, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Pinterest, active on those channels. Digital for Sales is digital, the number 4, sales, and we're mostly active on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find me at Jill_Holtz on Twitter as well.
Jill, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on JSB Talks Digital.
Thanks, Joanne.
Shoutouts.
In this part of the show, I give shout-outs to brands, organisations or individuals whose work online is remarkable and worth talking about. In this week's show, I'm giving a nod to 3 of my favourite content creators, a podcaster, a vlogger and a blogger.
1.
When I'm not listening to my own podcast, I'm usually listening to Amy Porterfield's Online Marketing Made Easy podcast, featuring insights from A-list online marketing experts, as well as mini marketing masterclasses and step-by-step guides. Each episode is designed to help you take immediate action on the most important strategies for starting, scaling, and automating your online business. Amy says her speciality is getting into the online trenches with you. So, if you want to dig deep on a topic, be sure to subscribe to Amy's podcast on iTunes, or you can subscribe for email updates when a show goes live. She currently has over 160 episodes on her website at amyporterfield.com.
2.
Roberto Blake is a creative entrepreneur helping individuals and businesses develop engaging brands and content, and he's also a former guest on this podcast on episode 31. Roberto has developed an amazing YouTube channel and has built up a community around his content of almost 250,000 subscribers. Roberto is very passionate about creating consistent content. In fact, he says that you're not really a YouTuber or a vlogger until you produce 1 video a week. I'm currently vlogging once a month, so my challenge is to increase that to weekly. I've got my new Canon M3, so no more excuses. I highly recommend you subscribe to Roberto's YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/Roberto Blake 2.
3.
Neil Patel is a New York Times best-selling author. The Wall Street Journal calls him a top influencer on the web. Forbes says he is one of the top 10 marketers in the world. And Entrepreneur magazine says he has created one of the 100 most brilliant companies. Now, you don't get those accolades unless you produce quality content consistently. Neil was recognised as a top entrepreneur under the age of 30 by President Obama and a top 100 entrepreneur under the age of 35 by the United Nations. So, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to his blog at neilpatel.com/blog.
Ask JSB.
Ask JSB brings the voices of my listeners onto the show. So you have an opportunity to ask me a question, have it aired on the podcast, and I will respond accordingly. If you want to hear your voice on JSB Talks Digital, simply log on to digitaltraininginstitute.ie/askjsb. I can't wait to hear your voicemail.
Hi Joanne, my name is Robert Herdman from Belfast, and I have a small podcast show. My question was, how do I market my podcast show throughout the social media platforms to the best advantage and build an audience?
Thanks for your question, Robert. Social media is the place to trigger conversations and to funnel fans to another place on the web where we get a conversion. In your case, you want to get more people to subscribe to your podcast. So here is my top 10 tips on how I would leverage social media. Share each podcast across all your social networks. Be sure to refine the copy relevant to the channel. Pin your episode to your Facebook page and Twitter profile. Pinning your episode will give your newest episode more visibility. Create custom images for each episode. Make sure the featured image is optimized for each social network. Tease your audience. Share a small snippet of your podcast 24 hours before the show goes live. I do this on Snapchat. Reshare, and reshare. Set a sharing schedule for each episode. It's not good enough to simply share it once it goes live. You need to reshare it using scheduling software for repeated traffic. Go live. Why not leverage live video to show people the behind the scenes? I do this quarterly. Launch a podcast hashtag and use it every time you tweet about it or share it on Instagram. Quote graphics give an engaging visual presentation. Take the top quote from the show and share it on all social networks with a link back to the podcast. Run a contest. Some podcasters launch contests to get podcast reviews. And finally, celebrate milestones like your first 20 shows or an exclusive interview. Happy podcast promotion, Robert. And don't forget, consistency is key, and this approach alone will help you grow your audience.
JSB's column.
Today's column, I share my top content marketing tips and some 2017 content marketing trends. So, if you want to be a master content marketer just like JSB, then keep listening. Content marketing is one of the key elements of digital marketing, and in fact, it's my most trusted tactic for generating qualified leads for my business. It's a fail-safe approach, in my opinion. Let me give you a valuable piece of advice around developing your content calendar and committing to consistency. Think about content in two ways. Branded content, promoting your product or service in your content, and customer content, focusing on the needs of your audience. I would also advise to prioritize quality content over the quantity of content you publish. You need to think about how the content you produce impacts the overall experience a person has with your company or organisation. Point Visible have put together a really useful infographic charting the 2017 content marketing statistics and trends. Here's my top takeaways from that report. Research shows that long-form blog posts generate 9 times more leads than short-form blog posts. The average reader only spends 37 seconds reading a blog post. 40% of marketers say blogging is their number one most important content strategy. 68% of consumers feel more positive about a brand after consuming content from it. 70% of people would rather learn about a company through an article rather than an advert. 4 times as many consumers would prefer to watch a video about a product than to read about it. And over 90% of marketers said they used visual content in more than 50% of the articles they published. Here are also some important trends that you need to watch out for. At least 309 million people, or 16% of the world's 1.9 billion smartphone population, are blocking ads on the mobile web, and this will increase. And in 2017, more marketers will launch targeted e-newsletters as the key method to grow audiences, so don't forget about email. I previously wrote a blog post about the top 10 ways to master content marketing, so make sure that you jump over to digitaltraining.ie where I'll have a link to that. But first, let me give you one key tip. YouTube describes content in 3 ways. They call it H content. First, hygiene content. How to do, answer questions. And SEO is very important in this type of content. 2, hub content. Storytelling that just doesn't solve a problem, but storytelling that creates an emotional connection with your audience. And finally, hero content. Content that has the opportunity for vast exposure, that creates a story, and is beyond your product or service. So, if you really want to commit to content, plan your calendar, follow my steps, and produce content with passion.
Social media tool of the week.
The social media tool that saved my working week this week is TrendSpotter. If you want your content to be ahead of the curve, then TrendSpotter lets you tap into emerging trends on social media. This gives you early signals about hot topics, popular hashtags, and rising influencers. It also gives you positive and negative sentiment measurements for each trend it identifies, right down to specific emotions such as fear or excitement. With TrendSpotter, you can get in at the start of trends instead of jumping on bandwagons that have already passed. To take a trial, log on to trendspotter.com. And as a side note in this section this week, Curata have created a super infographic of the ultimate content marketing tool list. So be sure to check it out on the blog post associated with this podcast on digitaltraining.ie. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of JSB Talks Digital. To ensure you never miss a show, please subscribe on your smartphone. I'm on iTunes, Stitcher, and on SoundCloud. And if you're a regular listener, I'd really love a review. As always, I have everything discussed on today's show on my blog at digitaltraining.ie. And I want your questions. So if there's a burning digital marketing or social media query keeping you up all night, simply ask JSB. I am Joanne Sweeney-Burke. This is JSB Talks Digital. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.
JSB Talks Digital.